Doctor won't be a kept man. My heart belongs ashore. Chapter 1101. What do you want to do? Katie asked nervously, recalling how Kiran York had brutally beaten Ailes. Her face was filled with tension and unease. Relax, I don't intend to kill you, so I won't bother your grandfather either. Kiran closed his eyes, ignoring Katie. Katie, frustrated and helpless, had no choice but to call her grandfather. The call was quickly answered and Nicholas's calm voice came through. Katie, have they released you? Katie cast a venomous glance at Kiran and said to her grandfather, They haven't released me. That bastard made me call you. I don't know what he wants. Her face was still filled with anger as she glared at Kiran, seemingly gritting her teeth in hatred. Kiran, however, remained calm and spoke to Nicholas on the other end of the line. Horace Moor has taken Finn Ludwig and his wife. If you can help find them, I will cure all your people. Nicholas smiled upon hearing Kiran's proposal. No problem. I'll arrange for people to help find them right away. He then hung up the phone promptly. Katie was taken aback, not expecting her grandfather to be so compliant. Hearing that Nicholas was going to help, Ailes felt a surge of hope. He knew that Kiran's wrath could mean his death at any moment if Horace wasn't found. Nicholas quickly arranged for his family to start searching for Horace throughout Man City. Kiran waited for news from Nicholas while Yvonne Quinn stopped supervising Katie, allowing her to move around freely. Katie occasionally glanced at Kiran, feeling a mix of frustration and inexplicable anger toward this domineering man from the East. Though he was handsome, his arrogance irritated her. She even fantasized about stabbing him. An hour and a half later, Nicholas called back. Katie quickly put the call on speakerphone and asked anxiously, Grandfather, any news? According to the surveillance footage, he disappeared after reaching 7th Street in the southeast of Man City, Nicholas informed Katie. Katie looked at Kiran, seeking his direction. Nicholas, thank you. I will come to treat your people after this, Kiran said, then stood up and looked at Katie and Ailes. We're going to 7th Street in Man City now. Katie was reluctant, but Ailes eagerly ran to the car, desperate to find Finn Ludwig and save his own life. 20 minutes later, they arrived at 7th Street, a bustling area with luxury brands from around the world. Normally, Yvonne Quinn and Lindsay Ludwig would have been excited to explore such a place. Still, now they were preoccupied with worry, especially Lindsay, who was anxious about her parents' safety. Kiran scanned the area and said to Ailes, Get back in the car and drive through 7th Street. Keep going forward. Ailes, though confused, nodded and complied. Katie, puzzled, asked Kiran, Why aren't we searching if he came here? Kiran didn't reply, but his expression suggested he thought Katie was foolish. This infuriated her, and she clenched her fists in anger, glaring at Kiran. Kiran ignored her, closing his eyes and seemingly resting while using his senses and the power of the dragon vein to search for Horace. He believed Horace wouldn't stay in such a busy area, and he didn't sense the power of the Dragon Saliva here. Ailes unknowingly drove out of 7th Street and into the suburbs. Kiran's senses picked up Horace's presence, mixed with rage and hatred. Stop the car, Kiran ordered. Ailes, now resigned to being the driver, obediently stopped. Kiran turned to Yvonne and Lindsay. Wait in the car, I'm going to rescue them. Lindsay wanted to protest, but Yvonne held her back. Kiran got out and headed towards a distant house. This suburban area was like a scattered village, with houses far apart. After passing 3 houses, Kiran stopped at the 4th, feeling the evil power of the Dragon Saliva clashing with his dragon vein. Horace, inside, sensed Kiran's presence and panicked. He looked at the unconscious Finn Ludwig and his wife, a cold glint in his eyes. Kiran pushed open the door and walked in, immediately feeling the strong presence of Dragon Saliva from the basement. Kiran, don't come any closer or I'll kill them, Horace shouted, trying to hide his fear. Kiran remained calm, following the voice to the basement, where he saw Horace standing between the unconscious Ludwigs. Kiran was relieved to see them unharmed and looked at Horace with cold fury, recalling the atrocities he had committed. Sensing Kiran's anger, Horace grew nervous and frantic. What do you want, Kiran? He stammered. Kiran couldn't help but chuckle. I'm here. What do you think? You just want to save them, right? I'll let them go if you spare me. Horace tried to negotiate, controlling his fear. Kiran shook his head, his eyes sharp. Fear flashed in Horace's eyes, quickly replaced by anger. Chapter 1102. Kiran York, don't push me, or I'll take them down with me, Horace Moor said in desperation, placing his hands on Finn Ludwig and his wife. He knew that his chances of escaping from Kiran were slim. Kiran remained calm, watching Horace. Do you think you still have a chance to act? Despite his fear, Horace stared firmly at Kiran and said, If worse comes to worst, we all die together. With them accompanying me, what do I have to fear? Kiran shook his head. You want to take everyone down with you, but you need the ability to do so. Right now, you don't have it. Do you really think I'm that weak? Kiran, you either leave immediately or cripple yourself. Otherwise, I'll kill them, Horace blustered, trying to appear fierce and intimidating. Kiran didn't move, his gaze cold and filled with hatred before returning to a serene expression. Horace believed Kiran was just pretending to be calm, making him feel more confident. Kneel and beg me to spare you and I might let them go. You want to trade my life for tears? Kiran's tone was mocking. Horace was determined, believing Kiran cared deeply for the Ludwigs. No matter how powerful you are, I hold their lives in my hands. I can decide their fate easily. Horace feigned arrogance, thinking Kiran would yield to save them. Kiran shook his head, mocking. Then go ahead and kill them. I'm waiting. Kiran's attitude infuriated Horace. Then you can collect their bodies, Horace yelled, grabbing Maxine Daines's neck, ready to snap it. Suddenly, he felt his strength leave him, unable to exert any force. Horace's face turned pale with shock as he looked at Kiran, his eyes filled with terror. What's happening? You're already under my control. You have no chance to kill anyone, Kiran said with a serene smile, his voice calm. Kiran didn't explain that this was mental control, a skill he had honed with Lady Meiji on Saintess Mountain. The power of the Dragon Vein and Dragon Saliva had similarities, but the latter was evil and weaker compared to the pure Dragon Vein power. With his mental control, Horace's aura couldn't be released. Kiran walked over and easily took Finn Ludwig and his wife from Horace's grip. Horace, pale and powerless, stood like a puppet, unable to move or escape. Kiran looked at Horace, anger flaring. Today I will avenge Barbara. Hearing Barbara's name, Horace shivered, remembering how he had tormented her, his face showing panic. Kiran, don't go too far or I'll take you down with me. You can't even move. What can you do? Kiran retorted, his voice cold. His hand moved swiftly, the slap echoing in the basement. Horace's face turned icy, blood trickling from his mouth, filled with despair and anger. Kiran, even if you kill me, the evil power of the Dragon Saliva won't be destroyed. A new me will rise, Horace shouted in defiance. Kiran paused, understanding the Dragon Saliva's power had been corrupted, but not expecting it to be indestructible. Seeing Kiran's reaction, Horace continued, I assure you, the power of the Dragon Saliva cannot be destroyed. Kiran's lips curled into a cold smile, his hand extended, fingers pressing on Horace's head. The memory of Barbara's tragic death fueled his rage, not allowing Horace to be arrogant. Crack! The sound of bones breaking echoed, and Horace's head split open like a crushed pumpkin, red and white matter oozing out. Horace's face was frozen in terror and disbelief, never imagining he would be killed this way. With his consciousness fading, Horace unleashed the power of the Dragon Saliva. Black rays burst from his body, spreading like dark clouds in all directions. Kiran knew this was bad. He quickly channeled his Dragon Vein power to counter the black substance, which seemed to vanish like an explosion. However, Kiran understood that the black substance hadn't been destroyed. It had just disappeared. Horace fell to the ground with a triumphant look in his eyes. He knew his death was inevitable against Kiran's absolute power, but he hadn't expected this method. Seeing the black substance escape, he was confident the evil Dragon Saliva power would continue to haunt Kiran. Realizing the Dragon Saliva's power had vanished, Kiran felt helpless, but carried Finn Ludwig and his wife out of the villa. He didn't know that the evil power of the Dragon Saliva was causing a greater crisis. See Chapter 1103. Dad, Mom. Lindsay Ludwig was overjoyed to see Kiran York bringing her parents back. Tears streamed from her beautiful eyes as she rushed over. Finn Ludwig and Maxine Daines had regained consciousness. Seeing their two daughters, they were overwhelmed with tears and happiness. Yvonne Quinn quickly joined them, and the four embraced each other, crying with relief. For Finn and Maxine, it felt like they had just survived a life-and-death ordeal with their daughters. Finn was the first to regain his composure. He wiped away his tears and looked at Kiran. Once again, we owe you our lives. Without you, we would be dead. Maxine gently stroked her daughter's hair and smiled at Kiran. Our family owes you so much. She then looked at her daughters as if suggesting that one of them should be with Kiran. Kiran felt a bit embarrassed. Yvonne clung to Maxine's arm and said coquettishly, He's not losing out. He's already slept with me. Kiran's face turned red. Although he knew Yvonne wasn't actually Finn and Maxine's daughter, they believed she was. Ha ha! Finn laughed heartily, looking at Kiran with joy in his eyes. Maxine's face flushed slightly, but she was clearly happy. Yvonne teased Kiran, Why don't you sleep with my sister too? Lindsay's face turned crimson. Her mature, alluring figure became even more captivating. Her face showed a hint of expectation as if she hoped Kiran would agree. Lindsay deeply loved Kiran. Every time she thought about the acupuncture he had performed on her foot, she was driven to madness by the sensation. Kiran shook his head. "Let's not joke around. We need to leave." Finn and the others nodded, understanding it wasn't the time for jokes. They all got back into the car. Lindsay felt a bit disappointed that Kiran hadn't agreed. Ailes and Katie were waiting in the car. Seeing everyone return safely, they were shocked. Kiran was genuinely formidable. Ailes, worried for his life, looked at Finn with a face full of remorse. "Mr. Ludwig, I'm sorry. Konta Yasuda instigated this kidnapping. I only followed Davis's orders to target you." Initially, Finn glared at Ailes angrily, but hearing the apology and seeing him acting like a chauffeur, he was slightly puzzled and glanced at Kiran. "Ailes, enough talking. Drive us to Nicholas's house," Kiran commanded. "Yes, young Master York," Ailes replied, relieved, and started the car. Finn and Maxine were even more impressed that Kiran had made Ailes obedient. During their kidnapping, Ailes had humiliated and mocked them, but now they believed Kiran would handle everything. Katie sat silently, occasionally glancing at Yvonne and Lindsay. She saw the joy in their eyes as they looked at Kiran and felt disdain. To Katie, although Kiran was handsome and manly, he lacked the gentlemanly charm she valued. When they arrived at Nicholas's house, Nicholas himself was there to greet them. Seeing the stark contrast from his first visit, Kiran was curious. As soon as Ailes stopped the car, Nicholas stepped forward, opening Kiran's door personally. "Young Master York, thank you for your efforts." Nicholas's humility made Kiran even more curious. Kiran calmly nodded and got out of the car with the demeanor of a leader. Everyone else got out quickly and Katie hurried over to Kiran, grabbing his arm. "Can we go save my family now?" Nicholas interrupted before Kiran could respond. "There's no rush. We'll discuss it shortly." Katie was stunned and looked at her grandfather, wanting to speak, but Nicholas turned to Finn and Maxine with a smile. "You are welcome guests." Finn and Maxine, unaware of the relationship between Kiran and Nicholas, smiled and nodded. "Young Master York, would you like to rest inside?" Nicholas invited humbly. Kiran didn't move, instead looking at Ailes. Ailes was anxious, fearing Kiran would seek revenge. He knew he had wronged someone powerful and was terrified. With a thud, Ailes knelt before Kiran. "Young Master York, I was wrong. Please spare my life." Kiran remained silent, watching Ailes. Panicked, Ailes began kowtowing. All his previous arrogance was gone. He looked like a pitiful dog. Nicholas's eyes narrowed. Despite his hatred for Ailes, seeing a fellow countryman so humbled before Kiran left him with mixed feelings. Kiran knew Ailes was just a sycophant. Killing him would be easy, but he wanted to ensure these Westerners behaved and didn't infringe on Dragon's land. Kiran spoke. "Go find the others. I still want to challenge your Western experts." Ailes was shocked, not expecting Kiran to remember that challenge. Nicholas, on the other hand, was delighted. "Ailes, since young Master York has requested, you should invite the top 5 experts from the West. Only they can match him." Ailes was confused by Kiran's intent, but sensed Nicholas's eagerness. Kiran raised an eyebrow, suspecting Nicholas was trying to use him. Smiling, Kiran said, "Invite your top 5 experts. I'll duel them." Nicholas's excitement was palpable, while Ailes's face showed growing panic. Chapter 1104. Young Master York, those 5 experts are not just famous for nothing. "Are you sure about this?" Ailes said, thinking about the 5 top experts, each of whom was elusive and highly skilled in martial arts. He looked at Kiran York, trying to persuade him cautiously. "Get it done within 3 days or you'll face my wrath," Kiran ordered Ailes coldly. Ailes was so frightened that he didn't dare say another word and quickly nodded. "Thank you for your effort, Mr. Ailes. We'll be waiting for your news," Nicholas said, smiling. He then turned to Kiran and with a courteous bow invited him, "Young Master York, please come inside." Kiran ignored Ailes and followed Nicholas inside. Katie was still worried about her poisoned family members, but seeing her grandfather's indifference, she didn't dare to say anything. Everyone moved to the living room, where Nicholas hosted Kiran and the others warmly. Kiran knew Nicholas's hospitality had a purpose, but chose not to expose it. Nicholas held a banquet for Kiran and his group. Throughout the meal, Nicholas avoided the topic of rescuing Katie's family whenever she brought it up. During dinner, Kiran mentioned sending Finn Ludwig and his wife back to their country, to which Nicholas agreed. After the meal, Nicholas arranged for a car to take the Ludwigs to the airport. Although Lindsay wanted to stay with Kiran, her concern for her parents' safety led her to return home with them. Kiran and Yvonne declined the Nicholas family's accommodation and checked into the Hilton Hotel. 2 hours later, Kiran received a call from Lindsay, confirming their safe arrival back home. This eased Kiran's mind. Kiran sat on the sofa, deep in thought, his expression serious. Yvonne leaned over. "What are you thinking about? Shouldn't we go to bed?" Now alone with Kiran, Yvonne, wearing sexy lingerie, seemed relaxed and eager. Though tempted by Yvonne, Kiran frowned and asked, "Don't you think the Nicholas family is acting strange?" "Yes, very strange. I realized when we were at their house that the poisoned people were no longer there," Yvonne said, deliberately teasing Kiran while nodding. "If they're gone, where did they go?" Kiran pondered aloud, his eyes reflecting his deep thoughts. "Who cares about them? Their life or death has nothing to do with us," Yvonne said as she straddled Kiran's lap, eager to be with him. Kiran gently wrapped his arms around Yvonne's waist but remained calm. "I think Nicholas is using us. He seems to want us to kill those so-called top 5 Western experts." Yvonne smiled brightly, raising her fair hand to touch Kiran's cheek gently. "I thought you were attracted to Katie and seduced by her, but you're still very clear-headed." Kiran felt a bit speechless and glared at Yvonne. "Don't you know me by now?" "I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if you're even a man," Yvonne teased, laughing as she moved seductively in Kiran's lap. "You're acting like you don't need a woman." Kiran didn't turn into a hungry wolf but said, "We should investigate Nicholas's house." "I don't want to go," Yvonne said firmly, her eyes burning with the desire to stay with Kiran. Kiran knew what Yvonne wanted and felt somewhat helpless. "Be with me first, then I'll go with you," Yvonne said softly, her arms around Kiran's neck, her body pressing close to his. Kiran knew he couldn't leave her behind. Most importantly, he didn't feel safe leaving Yvonne alone, especially thinking about the black substance from Horace Moor. So Kiran lifted Yvonne and carried her to bed. Yvonne, who had longed for this moment, finally united with Kiran passionately. Being with Yvonne wasn't just about satisfying desire. Kiran also helped her cultivate, hoping to strengthen the women around him. They enjoyed their love and cultivated together. At Nicholas's house, he looked at his granddaughter, Katie. "You need to go to the hotel and stay with Kiran and the others." Katie was stunned. "Grandfather, why should I stay with them at the hotel? They can take care of themselves." Nicholas smiled at Katie's reluctance. "As our guests, we must treat them with importance." Katie's eyes filled with anger and disdain. "They're not guests. They're more like damned people who deserve to die." "Where are our poisoned family members?" Katie asked, but Nicholas ignored her question and said sternly, "Your job is to stay with Kiran and Yvonne 24 hours a day." "How is that possible? Do I stay with them even when they sleep?" Katie protested angrily. "If you get the chance to sleep with them, then do it," Nicholas said indifferently. Katie's face turned pale, filled with anger and humiliation, feeling her grandfather didn't care about her. "Don't waste time. Go now," Nicholas ordered firmly. Katie didn't dare defy her grandfather's orders, so she nodded, stood up, and left, her eyes still filled with fury. Nicholas watched her go, his smile widening as he quickly walked into the basement. The basement was highly secure, isolated from the outside world. He opened the basement door, revealing the people poisoned by the GU. Though still poisoned, they radiated a violent aura, powerful enough to destroy everything. If Kiran saw this, he would be shocked. All these people possessed the power of Dragon Saliva. Chapter 1105. "Greetings, Master." The Nicholas family members who were poisoned with the GU toxin greeted Nicholas respectfully upon seeing him. "How are you all feeling now?" Nicholas asked, looking at the group. "We're fine now. We feel an endless stream of power that keeps increasing our strength," they chirped excitedly. Their voices filled with joy and even a hint of bloodlust. Nicholas nodded in satisfaction and said to them, "Endure a few more days. Once Kiran York has killed the 5 Western experts, it will be time for the Nicholas family to make its move." "Don't worry, Master. We will not fail you," the excited and thrilled group responded. Nicholas nodded, his eyes also filled with joy. After inspecting them briefly, he turned and left. Initially, these people were on the brink of death from the Jew poison, but suddenly, some black substance entered their bodies, making them stronger. Nicholas and his people didn't understand why, but they were overjoyed. This was why Nicholas hadn't let these people meet Kiran or allowed Yvonne Quinn to detoxify them. Nicholas himself had robust strength, enabling him to resist the Jew poison and avoid being poisoned. Kiran had no idea that Horace Moor's death caused the Dragon Saliva power to quickly seek new hosts, finding the poisoned people to be the best vessels. As a result, these people became beneficiaries. Seeing their strength continuously improving, Nicholas was filled with anticipation for their future. As one of the 3 major families in the Western world, the Nicholas family had always dreamed of becoming the top family. Achieving this required not just money, but also martial strength. The existence of the 5 Western experts balanced the Western world, preventing families from excessively infringing on each other due to fear of being annihilated. These experts acted as deterrents to keep the families in check. Kiran's challenge to these 5 experts was beneficial to the Nicholas family, regardless of the outcome. If Kiran managed to kill the 5 experts, the Nicholas family could rise to power. To achieve this, Nicholas was even willing to send his granddaughter to accompany Kiran, even if it meant Kiran would sleep with her. Using Kiran was his greatest desire. Nicholas was now playing a grand game of chess that could unify the Western world under his control, with Kiran unknowingly becoming a key piece. Katie reluctantly arrived at Kiran's room in the Hilton Hotel. She knocked gently on the door. Inside, Kiran and Yvonne had just finished an intimate moment. Yvonne lay on the bed, her body flushed and absorbing Kiran's dragon vein power. Kiran heard the knock and quickly put on his clothes and opened the door, unaware it was Katie. Katie saw Kiran's slightly sweaty hair and his relaxed expression. Smelling the scent of male hormones in the air, she immediately understood what had happened, causing her heart to race. She inwardly cursed Kiran as a pervert. Kiran was surprised to see Katie and asked, "What do you need?" "My grandfather said you are our esteemed guest and sent me to attend to your needs," Katie replied, her tone tinged with displeasure. Kiran's eyes narrowed as he understood Nicholas's intention to have her monitor him. He said, "No need. If I need anything, I'll contact your family. You can go now." Katie recalled her grandfather's words about letting Kiran sleep with her if necessary. Seeing that Kiran had clearly been with another woman and didn't value her, she felt a surge of humiliation and anger. In Kiran's eyes, she seemed worthless despite being a sought-after heiress of the Nicholas family. Enraged, Katie pushed past Kiran and entered the room. Kiran had taken a suite, and Yvonne was still in the bedroom. Katie sat on the sofa, crossing her legs, and the black stockings highlighted her fair skin and added to her allure. She looked at Kiran with a haughty expression, believing her charm would move him, expecting him to kneel before her. Instead, Kiran ignored her, causing her to feel even more humiliated and frustrated. Kiran saw through Katie's act and recognized Nicholas's scheme. He decided to play along, curious about Nicholas's ultimate plan. "If you want to stay, then stay," Kiran said, closing the door and returning to the bedroom. Katie felt even more humiliated that Kiran didn't acknowledge her, questioning her attractiveness. She looked stunning, dressed in a black skirt, stockings, and high heels, yet received no appreciation, making her feel dull and invisible. Anger and frustration boiled inside her. She stormed toward Kiran's bedroom door, but just as she reached it, she heard sounds that made her blush. Her heart pounded, and her breathing became rapid. Chapter 1106. Inside the room, Kiran York was massaging Yvonne Quinn on the bed. As Kiran's massage continued, the rosy dragon vein energy within Yvonne's body integrated more rapidly, causing her pores to open and expel impurities, purifying her body. This process made Yvonne feel incredibly comfortable, even to the point of letting out some enticing sounds. However, her alluring sounds led Katie to misunderstand what was happening inside. Katie, who had just tried to seduce Kiran herself and been ignored, was now furious, thinking they were engaging in something indecent. At first, Katie tried to control her anger, covering her ears and cursing silently to avoid listening. However, she soon couldn't contain her rage any longer as Yvonne's sounds grew louder, almost crazed. Katie's anger finally exploded. She jumped up from the sofa, her high heels clacking as she rushed inside. Bang! She kicked open the bedroom door, her eyes blazing with anger as she stared at the two inside. But what she saw was Kiran massaging Yvonne, nothing like the scenes she had imagined over and over in her mind. This realization made Katie's face flush bright red. Yvonne, who had been enjoying herself and making soft noises, was suddenly interrupted and glared at the intruder. Seeing it was Katie, Yvonne's beautiful face broke into a triumphant smile. She looked at Kiran and said, "Hubby, could it be that Katie has fallen for you and is jealous?" Before Kiran could respond, an embarrassed and furious Katie retorted coldly, "Only people from your country would like someone like him. I certainly wouldn't." "What's wrong with my hubby? Where's the problem?" Yvonne said, exuding charm. She wrapped her arms around Kiran's neck and slowly sat up, her beautiful face smiling as she prepared to kiss Kiran. Kiran, also stung by Katie's words, lowered his head to kiss Yvonne, hoping to irritate Katie enough to leave so they could have some peace. He was annoyed with Nicholas for having his granddaughter monitor him, especially since Nicholas clearly had secrets regarding the family members infected with goo poison. The more Kiran thought about it, the more he wanted Katie to leave quickly. Katie, initially enraged, quickly calmed down and taunted, "If you have the guts, perform your passion for me, live. I don't mind watching a live show." Kiran remained unfazed, but Yvonne couldn't help but laugh. She looked at Katie and said, "If you want to watch a live show, you'll have to pay. How much do you want? 1 million? 10 million? Katie scoffed, becoming more arrogant and dismissive. 10 billion and I'll perform for you, Yvonne said, looking at Katie. Katie, furious at the outrageous demand, nonetheless pulled out a checkbook and quickly wrote a check for 10 billion, throwing it in front of them. 10 billion, now perform. Kiran was stunned, glaring at Yvonne as if to say she had taken the joke too far. However, he was also shocked by Katie's wealth and audacity. Unfazed, Yvonne picked up the check and slowly removed her nightgown, draped it over herself, then stopped moving and smiled at Katie. Initially thinking Yvonne was serious about performing, Katie felt mocked that Yvonne didn't continue. She sneered and said, "What's wrong? Aren't you going to start? Or are you incapable?" Kiran thought to himself, "These women are crazy. It's already over. What else do you want to start?" Yvonne looked at Katie with a perplexed smile. Katie, confused, replied, "You said you would perform. You haven't even started." "I said I would perform taking off my clothes. Didn't you see me take off my nightgown?" Yvonne struggled to hold back her laughter, her eyes full of triumph. Katie was furious, realizing she had been tricked. "You played me. I'm not playing you. You never specified what kind of performance. I think undressing is pretty passionate," Yvonne said, waving the 10 billion check in front of Kiran. "Hubby, now we have money to shop on 7th Street in Man City." Katie felt her chest heave with anger, and she pressed her hand against it, trying to suppress her rage. Watching Katie's chest, Yvonne laughed, "Stay calm or you'll burst your clothes." Katie, even more enraged, pointed at Yvonne and Kiran. "You two are just frauds." Yvonne shook her head. "We didn't cheat you out of money or affection. I did what I promised. What more do you want?" "You." Katie fumed, unable to find words, glaring at Yvonne. She had indeed said passion, but hadn't specified what kind. She couldn't bring herself to say it outright, giving Yvonne the loophole to exploit. For Katie, 10 billion wasn't the issue. The humiliation was. Yvonne's face was full of pride, as if she had won a victory. Katie finally stomped her foot in anger and stormed off. Yvonne's laughter rang like silver bells as she wrapped her arms around Kiran's neck and sat up, kissing his forehead. "Hubby, now we can go to Nicholas's house." Kiran nodded mechanically, his mind swirling. He finally understood how terrifying a woman's wrath could be, especially in a verbal battle. He was deeply impressed by Yvonne's cunning and wit. Katie, meanwhile, had driven off, heading back to her family. Kiran and Yvonne made their way to Nicholas's home. Nicholas sat in his study, drinking coffee, feeling relaxed and proud, dreaming of the family's rise. Chapter 1107. "Grandpa!" Katie's voice was filled with anger and grievance as she shouted at Nicholas upon entering. Nicholas was taken aback by Katie's shout, thinking she should be with Kiran. He turned to look towards the door. Katie's voluptuous figure was trembling with fury, as if she were a tree swaying in the wind. Her deep blue eyes seemed to burn with fiery rage, ready to consume everything. Suppressing the joy from his recent thoughts, Nicholas feigned a serious expression and asked Katie, "What happened?" "Kiran York is a shameless scoundrel with no gentlemanly manners," Katie angrily declared, denouncing Kiran. Initially, Nicholas thought Kiran had discovered some issue, making him nervous. But hearing Katie's disdain for Kiran, he felt relieved, indicating Katie had developed feelings for him. He smiled at Katie and said, "Different cultures have different views and opinions. You need to be tolerant and understanding." Katie sneered, "People like them are the scum of the earth. I don't want anything to do with them." Nicholas's expression turned serious, displeasure evident. "Kiran is our esteemed guest. You must treat him with the respect and courtesy due to a guest." Katie's face was filled with anger as she retorted, "Why should we treat them that way?" Nicholas's expression darkened further as he looked at Katie. "I know you have high standards and want to find a gentleman, but I'm telling you, you must maintain a good relationship with Kiran. You might even consider being with him." Katie's face showed a mix of complexity and fury. She hadn't expected her grandfather to suggest she offer herself to Kiran. "I will never give myself to Kiran. Who does he think he is? Scum." Katie's anger grew, and so did the volume of her insults. Meanwhile, Kiran and Yvonne had arrived at the Nicholas family villa. Despite the many bodyguards around, none noticed their presence. As they approached Nicholas's villa, they could clearly hear the argument between Nicholas and Katie. Yvonne almost laughed out loud at Katie's use of the word scum, but Kiran quickly covered her mouth. Yvonne pinched Kiran's side playfully, signaling that Katie thought he was scum for not sleeping with her. Kiran's face was filled with helplessness. What did he have to do with Katie? Inside, Nicholas's face had turned completely grim as he addressed Katie. Kiran is about to challenge the top 5 Western fighters. Being with Kiran is a win-win situation for us. Katie's expression changed slightly as she asked, "What do you mean by win-win?" Nicholas smirked. "If you are with Kiran and he loses to the top 5 Western fighters, we can claim that our family used our granddaughter to exhaust Kiran's strength, leading to his defeat." Katie's face turned red with shame and anger. Ignoring her reaction, Nicholas continued, "If Kiran defeats the top 5 Western fighters and you become his woman, he will naturally be more favorable towards our family. We benefit either way." Nicholas seemed very pleased with his plan, not caring about Katie's anger. Katie felt a mix of despair and fury. She couldn't believe her grandfather saw her as nothing more than a pawn. Kiran and Yvonne, overhearing Nicholas's scheme, were also taken aback. Kiran's mouth curled in disdain at Nicholas's ruthlessness and shamelessness. Yvonne's expression became complicated. She whispered to Kiran, "You might as well sleep with Katie. After all, it won't harm you." Kiran glared at Yvonne, almost telling her she had a terrible idea. Yvonne continued whispering, "I think the Nicholas family is hiding many secrets. This old fox is cunning. Even those infected with goo poison might become significant. Being with Katie could help you gather information." Kiran saw Yvonne's serious yet mischievous expression, and knew her thoughts were often wicked. Without saying more, Kiran pulled Yvonne away, quietly searching the villa for those infected with goo poison. He didn't care about Nicholas and Katie's conversation anymore. Yvonne was pleased with Kiran's principles. As a woman, she didn't want Kiran to be with Katie. She preferred spending every moment with Kiran and enjoying their intimate moments together. After searching the villa, they found nothing, especially not the people infected with goo poison. They exchanged curious glances. "Can you sense your own goo poison?" Kiran asked Yvonne. Yvonne didn't respond immediately but closed her eyes, pressing her palms together to sense her goo poison. After about 3 minutes, Yvonne opened her eyes, frowning and shaking her head in disappointment. Kiran felt the same sense of disappointment. He hadn't expected this outcome. "Let me try again," Kiran said, releasing his dragon vein energy to locate those infected with goo poison. His energy spread like a tide, quickly moving towards Nicholas's villa. Kiran was curious, realizing Nicholas had hidden those infected in the villa's basement. Was he not afraid of the poison? "Did you find them?" Yvonne asked eagerly. "It seems they're in the basement," Kiran replied. "Why don't you distract Katie while I check it out?" Yvonne suggested. Knowing Nicholas would be on high alert, Kiran replied, "You release some other goo to track them and I'll draw their attention." Yvonne nodded, moving to a secluded corner of the villa to release tracking goo. Kiran headed towards Nicholas's main entrance. Inside, Katie was still arguing with Nicholas. "I won't fall for someone like Kiran. He's scum." Katie stormed out, only to come face to face with Kiran. Chapter 1108, Scum! Katie suddenly saw Kiran York and was stunned for a moment, but then her anger flared even more, and she yelled at him furiously. To keep up the act, Kiran stepped forward and pulled Katie into his arms. Given Katie's height, she was nearly eye level with him. Being suddenly embraced, Katie's face showed both fear and anger. She raised her hand to struggle, even attempting to hit Kiran to break free. However, held tightly by Kiran, she found herself powerless. In a desperate move, Katie opened her mouth to bite Kiran. Looking at Katie's beautiful face and her azure eyes, Kiran steeled himself and leaned in to kiss her. Pop! The soft sound echoed in the air. "Ah!" Katie cried out, glaring at Kiran with intense anger. She couldn't believe Kiran had kissed her. Her first kiss was taken just like that by Kiran. Kiran, ignoring her reaction, scooped Katie up and carried her into the villa. Hearing the commotion outside, Nicholas stepped out and saw Kiran holding Katie. He was momentarily stunned to see Kiran but quickly smiled and said, "Katie just got back and is angry with you. It seems she's madly in love with you." Katie was about to deny it when Kiran lightly tapped her, preventing her from speaking. All she could do was glare at Kiran with eyes full of rage. Kiran smiled at Nicholas and said, "I want to sleep with your granddaughter, but I wasn't sure if you'd agree, so I came to ask." Kiran's bluntness took Nicholas aback but quickly responded, "Whatever you young people decide, I'm fine with it. Do as you please." Katie felt a wave of panic and anger, glaring at Kiran and hoping he wouldn't take it too far. Thinking about his current plan, Kiran smiled at Nicholas. "Why don't I borrow your villa for a while?" Nicholas hadn't expected Kiran to ask to use his villa. It felt like being bullied, having to give up his granddaughter and his home for Kiran. He felt humiliated. Kiran stood firm, knowing he had Nicholas cornered. Given Nicholas's sinister plans, there was no reason for him to refuse. After a brief silence, Nicholas forced a smile and said, "Since young Master York likes it, of course you can." "Then please arrange a room for me," Kiran said, tightening his hold on Katie, who shivered slightly, clearly agitated. Noticing their eagerness, Nicholas thought of his plan and led them upstairs with a forced smile. As soon as Nicholas left, a colorful butterfly flew into his study, searching quickly before landing on the floor tile under the desk and turning to Ash, Yvonne Quinn's tracking goo. The Gyu's death shocked Yvonne, revealing the basement's entrance under Nicholas's study. She tried to probe further with her Gyu, but it vanished instantly, likely destroyed by the strong aura within. Even Yvonne, who had recently gained strength from being with Kiran, felt she might have been injured without it. Yvonne was deeply concerned. The people infected with her goo poison had grown stronger, and the situation was increasingly worrisome and uncontrollable. Meanwhile, Kiran entered the room Nicholas had arranged. He gently placed Katie on the bed, a broad smile on his face. Katie, unable to move due to Kiran's pressure point technique, could only glare at him with eyes full of rage. Kiran looked at Katie and said, "Don't worry, I won't do anything to you." After hearing this, Katie felt somewhat relieved, and her anger in her eyes diminished slightly. Kiran continued, "Because I'm not interested in you at all." Katie's mouth opened in shock, revealing her white teeth as she nearly went mad with anger. Kiran thoughtfully nodded. Not interested at all. Katie, momentarily relaxed, now felt suffocated. It wasn't that Kiran had restrained himself out of decency, but that he simply wasn't attracted to her. For the proud Katie, this was a direct insult. Unable to move, Katie rolled her eyes in fury, almost passing out from anger. "To make your grandfather believe we're together, you need to play along," Kiran said, pressing a point on Katie's left leg. Katie's body shuddered as if struck by electricity, and she couldn't help but let out a sound, ambiguous and seductive. Hearing this from outside, Nicholas was convinced Kiran and Katie were indeed together. Katie, lying on the bed, felt humiliated, realizing Kiran was toying with her. As Kiran waited for Yvonne's message, he occasionally touched Katie's leg to keep her making sounds, maintaining the charade. Katie was nearly driven to insanity by this treatment, but Kiran paid no heed. Receiving Yvonne's message about the basement's location and the intense aura, Kiran's expression turned cold. He suspected those infected had absorbed the evil power of Dragon Saliva. Determined, Kiran stopped teasing Katie. He opened the window and jumped out, heading back to the study. Feeling embarrassed by his granddaughter's sounds, Nicholas had stepped out, leaving the study empty. Kiran found the entrance under the desk and opened it. A wave of scalding air rushed out, and Kiran had to wave his hands to suppress it. The infected people, now frenzied, swarmed towards him. Chapter 1109. A dense crowd of dozens of people, still in their suits, now covered in black dust and grime, filled the basement. Compared to their encounter at the airport, their aura had become much more potent, with a palpable, intense killing intent. Though they were below, upon seeing Kiran York, the Dragon Saliva power within them surged like a fountain, rushing towards him. Kiran's dragon vein energy naturally retaliated, causing explosive sounds to reverberate through the air. Kiran pressed his hands downward and unleashed a powerful strike. "Ah!" Cries echoed as two people close to Kiran were thrown back, creating a brief gap in the crowd. Whoosh! Kiran leaped down into the basement. Clatter! The rest swarmed around him, their faces filled with anger and viciousness. The two who had been thrown back got up, their necks cracking loudly. "Damn it! You want to die?" One of them cursed, clenching his fists, causing his joints to crackle. The killing intent in the basement surged, filled with an overwhelming aura. Kiran didn't attack immediately but frowned deeply. The situation was surprising. The Dragon Saliva power, which wasn't so potent in Horace Moor alone, seemed much stronger when dispersed among these people. Each of them now possessed strength comparable to Horace. This made Kiran wary of the Dragon Saliva's power, which seemed to amplify when divided. The crowd grew more agitated. The man who had cursed earlier swung his fist at Kiran, the punch carrying cold, violent energy like a wave of ice. Kiran didn't take it seriously, meeting the punch with a casual backhand. Bang! A dull sound echoed as their hands collided, but the man remained unmoved. Kiran was slightly stunned. He hadn't used much force, but the man's resilience was unexpected. "Good job, Aris." Another man who Kiran had knocked down earlier praised, then leaped at Kiran, aiming a kick. Kiran, no longer careless, turned swiftly, his eyes flashing. He caught the man's legs with a loud thud. The legs felt like iron pillars, incredibly hard, which surprised Kiran again at their newfound strength with Dragon Saliva. "I'll break your grip," the man roared, his legs surging with power, trying to break free. Kiran, growing annoyed, his eyes icy, yanked hard. The man was pulled closer, and Kiran's right foot shot up, kicking the man's head like a ball. Crack! A crisp bone-cracking sound echoed as the man's head snapped back, flying away. The man let out a final scream before dying, making the basement even more blood-soaked and terrifying. Kiran dropped the corpse, ready to deal with the others. Then, a strange scene unfolded. Black substances from the dead man's body swiftly spread and were absorbed by the others, making them even more potent. Kiran was shocked, realizing the Dragon Saliva's power could spread this way. Reflecting on Horace's last words, he regretted killing him. The power concentrated in Horace would not have spread so easily. Seeing his comrade's death, Horace became enraged. He approached Kiran with small, rapid steps, fists raised. Kiran, his eyes burning with anger, decided to test Horace. As Horace attacked, Kiran remained expressionless, meeting the punch with his own. Bang! Horace's head flew back like the previous man's. This time, Kiran quickly released his dragon vein energy to contain the black dragon's saliva power. The coldness of the energy seeped into Kiran, chilling him to the bone, similar to the coldness from Yvonne Quinn and Lady Meiji. Kiran tried to neutralize the power as the others, seeing the dragon saliva being absorbed by him, went berserk and charged. Kiran, focusing on absorbing the dragon saliva, dodged their attacks. The limited space in their combined assault made it difficult for him. He couldn't kill them carelessly, as the dragon saliva would spread further. Kiran engaged in a fierce battle, primarily dodging. The situation stalemated, with neither side gaining an advantage. Kiran, dedicating much effort to neutralizing the dragon saliva, found it impossible to absorb, making his body sluggish. At that moment, two men attacked from behind, aiming at his back. Abandoning his efforts to neutralize the power, Kiran released the dragon saliva. Bang! 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 Explosive sounds filled the air as the dragon saliva shot into the attackers, but they felt no pain, immersed in absorbing the power. Taking this chance, Kiran swiftly escaped the basement. The study was calm and undisturbed. Kiran sighed in relief and quickly returned to Katie's room. She lay on the bed, her face red, still affected by Kiran's earlier actions. He tapped her pressure points, lifting her, and swiftly left the villa. At the door, they encountered Nicholas. Chapter 1110. Seeing Kiran York holding his granddaughter Katie and recalling their recent escapades in the room, Nicholas smiled. "Young Master York, aren't you staying with us tonight?" Kiran regained his composure and shook his head. "No, I'm taking Katie back to the Hilton Hotel." Nicholas didn't object. Instead, he smiled and nodded. "I hope you'll be kind to my granddaughter Katie in the future. She's been pampered and sometimes has a bit of a temper." Kiran didn't want to waste time and merely smiled and nodded. "Don't worry. Would you like me to arrange a car to take you back?" Kiran shook his head, declining the offer, and disappeared into the night with Katie in his arms. Not suspecting anything, Nicholas didn't check the study's basement, and thus remained unaware of what had transpired there. After Kiran left, Yvonne Quinn quickly followed. Her face was pale, and her shirt front was stained with blood, indicating she had been attacked while experimenting with the Jew poison. "How are things?" Yvonne asked, looking at Kiran. Without speaking, Kiran grabbed Yvonne's wrist to check her injuries. "I'm fine," Yvonne smiled, feeling Kiran's concern. "Let's talk back at the hotel," Kiran said, reassured that Yvonne wasn't seriously hurt. He led her and carried Katie back to the Hilton Hotel. Once there, Kiran placed Katie on the living room sofa and took Yvonne to the bathroom. Soaking in the bathtub, although both were completely exposed, there was no hint of desire. Instead, Kiran spoke earnestly. "The evil power of the dragon saliva can actually multiply." Kiran detailed to Yvonne what had happened in the basement. Her expression grew serious as she listened. "If that's true, will there be many powerful fighters in the future?" Kiran shivered slightly at her words, realizing the gravity of the situation. The future could be terrifying if people discovered this phenomenon and started cultivating new hosts to absorb this power. Sensing Kiran's coldness, Yvonne gently hugged him. "Don't worry, I'm sure we'll find a solution." Kiran appreciated her reassurance and hugged her back. "The main issue isn't just that. It seems this dragon saliva power is more easily absorbed by these people than by Horace Moor." Yvonne's face turned grave with unease. Should we go back to Dragon's Land and check Jade Dragon Mountain? Kiran shook his head. We need to resolve this issue here first. If the evil power of the Dragon Saliva spreads in these countries, it could make the Western world incredibly powerful. We can't predict the consequences. Yvonne stiffened, knowing well the potential evil of a powerful Western world. She felt deeply unsettled. Don't worry, let's think it through first, Kiran comforted her. Yvonne nodded slightly. After they finished washing, Yvonne went to bed while Kiran sat cross-legged in the living room. He wanted to experience the Dragon Saliva power in his body. To his surprise, the power had vanished without a trace. As he mobilized his internal energy, he noticed the tiny golden ball within him had grown slightly larger. This unexpected change puzzled and intrigued Kiran. Had the evil Dragon Saliva power somehow promoted the growth of this golden ball? As Kiran pondered, he suddenly heard Lady Meiji's voice in his ear. Did you miss me? Kiran shivered with excitement. You're not dead? Did you really wish for my death so you'd never see me again? Lady Meiji's tone was filled with teasing and resentment. Of course not. I just didn't know where you went, Kiran quickly denied. So, do you like me? Lady Meiji seemed pleased, questioning Kiran. Kiran was a bit speechless. Where did you go? Even if you don't admit it, I know you care about me now, Lady Meiji said confidently. Kiran didn't want to get entangled in this discussion and admitted his concern for her. Just tell me where you are. I'm within you. Didn't you see that golden ball? Lady Meiji replied. How did you become that ball? Kiran asked, shocked. It's not that I became the ball. Your body has formed a golden core. This core contains dragon vein power, pagoda of nations power, and lightning tribulation power, enveloping me within, Lady Meiji explained. A golden core. Kiran was stunned. Yes, you're no longer just an ordinary person. You're now a cultivator. Lady Meiji's tone was serious yet joyful. Kiran was taken aback. He recalled his master mentioning that true cultivation success meant forming a golden core within, growing through various stages, and potentially achieving immortality. However, to him, those were just legends. He had focused on physical cultivation, enhancing his body. But after gaining dragon vein power, he began cultivating internal strength, including mental control, with Lady Meiji. He never expected to form a golden core. After saving me, your body combined these powers to form the golden core, Lady Meiji explained. What is its function? Kiran asked, filled with both joy and amazement.